Today's video is brought to you by Assiniboine Downs Gaming and Event Center. And be sure to tune in to Trust the Profits Live Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern for Monday Night Lights, hosted by Matthew DeSantis.
Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans, to this very special Royal Ascot preview. My name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Well, before we get into the whole week's worth of preview for Royal Ascot, just a reminder, like this video, comment below with what race you're looking most forward to or what horse you're looking most forward to seeing this week at Royal Ascot's meet. Obviously, one of the highlights of the year in racing across the world. We're here thrilled in the United States to be watching some of our horses going over to England to face some of the best competition out there. Obviously, we love watching European racing here on Trust the Profits. So if this is your first time checking out one of our videos, make sure to press that subscribe button. We have a lot obviously focused on North American racing, but we do cover big meets in Japan, in Europe, the Middle East, and so on. So like I said, we got something for everybody here. Make sure to press that subscribe button on Trust the Profits and on YouTube. So thanks so much for tuning in. This is obviously a big highlight for all of us who love racing. We love Royal Ascot, and it is one of the highlights of the year. There's obviously racing going from Tuesday through Saturday. Some of the biggest names in the sport are going to be running, names that are familiar to many North American racing fans, and of course, huge names that are very, very familiar to European racing fans. But I think for those of us who are in the United States and North America, this is always a good opportunity to get a look at the form of some of the top European horses, some of whom will be coming over for the Breeders' Cup this year. I always find that looking and paying attention to European racing around this time of year through the ARC, etc., is a good time to get a sense of the form that some of these horses are in. And we might very well see a few of them coming over to Santa Anita for this year's Breeders' Cup. Now, it's important to point out that many times the best European horses do not come over, in fact, to the Breeders' Cup. But trainers like Aidan O'Brien and Charlie Appleby, and to a lesser extent, John and Thaddy Gosden, have brought some of their horses over. So obviously, those are ones to keep a particular eye on this week. But as I mentioned, we also have a few North American horses, a few horses from the U.S., in particular from Wesley Ward. One in particular, American Rascal, who I think may have the best chance of making an impression over there. Of course, remember last year we had a Grand Motion filly, Spenderella, who ran a very big second place to Inspiral that day. So that was obviously a filly that was quite impressive. So we do see Americans doing well over there. Some of the Wesley Ward sprinters have not done quite as well because, again, sprinting is different. Everything is straight line sprinting over there in Royal Ascot, as opposed to here in the United States when you're talking about 5.5, 6, 7 furlong sprints. Even a mile, you're often going around one turn, if not two turns in the case of a mile. So a little bit of a different dynamic in terms of when horses get breathers, the riding styles, etc. So something to keep in mind, but we're thrilled to be covering Royal Ascot. And let's just dive into the preview. And what I'm going to be doing is talking about the group and graded stakes races on each day of the card. Not going to be covering every single race on the card, but just simply focusing on those group 1, 2, and 3 races and giving you a few horses to consider. Okay. Obviously, the fields are not completely set later in the week. There are some horses that are cross-nominated for different races. Horses like Broom or Highfield Princess may be actually listed in a couple of different places right now. But again, something to pay attention to later in the week as the fields start to solidify and firm up. But like I said, this is an opportunity for us to dive in and talk a little bit about some of these big names in European racing. Well, let's start with the races taking place on Tuesday, June 20th. We kick things off really in style with the Group 1 Queen Anne Stakes. And this is going to be a race that is very familiar, I think, for North American racing fans, because of course it features Modern Games, who has become a horse that runs regularly over here in the United States, has won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf 2 years ago at Del Mar under very unusual circumstances where the horse was accidentally scratched and then put back in for purse money only, then goes on to win. Won last year's Breeders' Cup Mile, came back with a rather disappointing second in the Maker's Mark Grade 1 Mile at Keeneland. That was the first start of the year, came back, ran very, very well in Newbury, and won over Chindit, who's in this race, as well as Berkshire Shadow, who's also in this race. And that was one where I believe Chindit was trying to savage William Buick aboard Modern Games as they were going by. But certainly Modern Games, if you look at the time form rating figures, if he runs anywhere near that last race, he should be able to win this race pretty easily. So he is, I think, understandably the strong favorite in this particular spot. Obviously, I will say, a horse like Inspiral, excellent horse, and one that you have to take very seriously, and an appropriate horse to be placed at 9-5 as well. This is a horse that is, has not run since last year at Ascot in the Queen Elizabeth II, and finishing sixth that day behind Bayside Boy and Modern Games. So this horse coming back from a really long layoff for John Gosden, Frankie Dettori aboard. This is a very honest horse, very good horse, a horse who has run very well off of long layoffs before, actually won last year at Royal Ascot, coming off of a long layoff, winning those Coronation Stakes over the aforementioned Spenderella. So is able to fire a big number off the layoff. So never fear about that. Now, in terms of maybe finding a little bit of value, I really like Mostabek a lot. And this is a horse, Mutsabek, who I just feel like is starting to run better and better races and is a pretty consistent horse. And at his best, I think is good enough to win this race, or at the very least finish in the top 2 or 3. You go back and look at that Group 2 victory 2 back at Newmarket. That was a really good race. That was a very solid time form rating of 121 compared to Modern Games 126, better than anything Inspiral's put out recently. And so, like I said, Mutsabek at 12-1, I think provides really good value. Yes, the horse finished 5th last time out, but again, that was, only 2 3/4 lengths behind Modern Games. So I think this horse has an opportunity to take a step forward. That's one that I would take a look at. And I'll give you another horse that at a huge price, an absolutely huge price, is Pogo, the 7-year-old horse, 60-1 on the morning line. My angle with Pogo is this, which is this horse does not run well overseas. And if you go and look at this horse's form, going back to last year, this horse runs in Saudi, in Maidan, and really runs 2 very poor races, comes back off the bench and immediately goes and starts winning races right off the bat. You see a huge jump in time form rating figures, runs 3 consecutive races running 116, and is extremely competitive in those races. Now what happens? They go back over to Maidan. They go back over to Saudi Arabia this year. Charlie Hill's horse does not run well again. Now is coming back from Maidan, 2nd year in a row. Do you expect to see a little bit of a perk up? Now, this is a much bigger test and a much tougher test than what Pogo's faced in the past, but he's come back off these layoffs and come back from running poorly in the Middle East to run well in group stage competition, Group 3, Group 2 races. This is a Group 1, granted a whole nother level, but just something to keep in mind. I think at a huge price, he's a horse to maybe think about including as a bomb. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Coventry Stakes. And this is, of course, for those 2-year-olds going 6 furlongs. This is just a straight shot. And this is one where I think a lot of people are very excited for. Give Me the Beat Boys, 6-1. This feels like, honestly, kind of taking money from a baby at 6-1. I'd be shocked if this horse actually went off at that price, because there's a lot of buzz around this horse, who went out and won Group 3 competition last time out. And I just think this is a horse that's getting better and better. You saw really big improvement in terms of the time form rating figures, and you showed the ability of this horse to get up in time to really run effectively on multiple tracks. So I like this one a lot. Frankie Dettori aboard, 6-1. Hard to go wrong with this horse, I think. And then you look at some other horses in this race. I mean, obviously River Timber for Aidan O'Brien, a horse that's done absolutely nothing wrong, goes out, wins in debut by 10 lengths, comes back to win in an allowance race, the Coolmore Stud, and wins impressively that day, going, 2.5 length victory, and has very similar time form ratings. I think what makes it stick out to me, though, is that's a horse that's 8-5 on the morning line, as opposed to Give Me the Beat Boys, 6-1. You're getting much better value with Give Me the Beat Boys. So that's one that I'll be absolutely looking at using, in this race. You look at some other opportunities in this race. I think a horse like Fandom at 10-1 is a little bit interesting. This is a Wesley Ward horse who is, here, making a debut in the United States in Keeneland. has been running very well leading up to this race, is shipping over, has Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard, who, if you're obviously, if you're an English racing fan, you may not be quite as familiar with, but Irad is largely considered the best North American jockey coming over, but had some troubles last year at Royal Ascot, just knowing the rules, knowing the procedures, etc. Won very impressively, won by 6 3/4 lengths in debut, and like I said, was a very impressive figure as well in terms of the time that this horse ran, running, I believe, 5.5 furlongs and 103 and 1. Then you have the favorite, or one of the two favorites, Asada. And this is a horse, again, very impressive on debut. William Buick aboard. You always have to take that seriously, and ran the biggest time form rating figure in the race at 92, winning that allowance, winning it by 12 lengths, and looking much, much the best that day. Obviously a horse you need to be considering including. But I think Give Me the Beat Boys gives you a little bit of value in the spot. Let's go to another Group 1 race, and that is the King's Stand Stakes, which is going 5 furlongs for 3-year-olds and up. And in this one, of course, Highfield Princess is in this field, is cross-entered and cross-nominated, I should say, in another race later in this week. So we'll see if she ends up running there or in one of the other races. But the horse that I really like in this race is Dramatized. And I know there's a great Australian horse in this race, Coolangatta, who has really done very little wrong, 5 for 8 winning in her career, and has won some big Group 1 races. So, down in Australia coming up, we've seen some of these Australian horses come up and run extraordinarily well at Ascot. So would not surprise me one bit to see that horse run well. And certainly I have it down as a horse to consider. Another horse that I didn't have here is a horse like Bradsell. This is a horse I really liked last year at Royal Ascot, ran very well, won the Coventry actually over Persian Force and Royal Scotsman, who were both next out winners. This is a horse that I think it really is the definition of a horse that doesn't really do a lot wrong, is 4 for 5 in the money, and, ran competitive third first time out this year. Did take a little bit of a step back last time in a Group 2 and finished well back behind Little Big Bear, and should have been Naring. There is maybe a concern there, but I still think this is a horse that has a good race in it. And at 30 to 1, you're obviously getting a huge price. Highfield Princess, obviously is a horse we covered here in North America coming into last year's Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, running fourth that day to the eventual winner Caravel, as well as Emirati Anna and Creative Force. Came back, ran a very nice second, a solid time form rating figure in a Group 2 Duke of York Clipper Stakes to Azure Blue that day. I think 6 furlongs is probably okay. I think the 6 furlongs is actually probably the better distance because this is a horse that, ran 5.5 at Keeneland. I think going straight is obviously preferred there rather than making the turns like she had to do here in the United States. Very classy mare, obviously, but one that I might be willing to play against in this particular spot. And so, like I said, my top pick in this one, a horse I really am excited about is Dramatized. This is a horse who ran big as a 2-year-old and has come back as a 3-year-old, taking that step forward that you would hope to see, recording a much improved time form rating for, had run kind of an 88, 81 last year, comes over to the United States in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, finishes second to Mischief Magic at a pretty nice price at 13 to 1. And then takes the long layoff, comes back, runs in the Group 2 last time out with William Buick aboard. Granted, you're getting Tud Hope now, who rode this horse last year to a couple of victories. So the jockey who's very familiar with the horse, obviously, and wins that Group 2 race. You see a huge bump up in terms of the time form pace rate figures, 113. So Dramatized, a horse that I'm going to be looking at using maybe up top. Like I said, at 5 to 1, you're getting a pretty nice price there. Let's move along to the St. James Palace Stakes, and this is an 8 furlong race for 3-year-old colts. And this is a very top-heavy race. Claudine and Paddington are kind of the cream of the crop here. This feels like a very chalky race to me. Paddington is the Aidan O'Brien horse. That's the one I'm going to be probably using up top. I do think Isaac Shelby at 8 to 1 is a little bit interesting in this particular race. That's a horse that again, has run very well, had one bad performance last year at Newmarket, but outside of that, really has run very, very honest every time out. And has a Group 2 victory, has a Group 3 victory, ran second by a neck at a Group 1 last time out in France at Longchamp. So I just think this is a horse at 8-1. You're getting a little bit of value if you're trying to get around some other horses. Obviously, a horse like Royal Scotsman, very nice horse as a 2-year-old, but maybe has not come back and taken the step forward as a 3-year-old. Did finish third in that Kipco 2000 Guineas at Newmarket back in May, but then followed that up with in the Irish 2000 Guineas with a rather disappointing ninth that day, and was actually the favorite. So, can this horse bounce back with Jamie Spencer aboard? Perhaps. And you're getting a big price at 15-1. So understandable if you want to go after this one. But Paddington, listen, 4 for 5 winning. Only loss was actually in debut. So has won the last 4 times out in a row. Just seems to be on a roll right now. That's going to be my top pick in that particular race in the St. James Palace Stakes. So that is Tuesday. But listen, that's just the start of things. We need to go to Wednesday and talk a little bit more about the races that we'll see that day. And in particular, we'll start things off with the Queen Mary Stakes. And this is, 5 furlongs for 2-year-old fillies. And, this is one where, I will be interested in seeing, how this one plays out, because I think this feels like a very wide open race. And I feel like it feels like a race where there's a lot of different options you can go in, and you can go and get yourself a little bit of a price in this particular race. But for me, I ultimately ended up kind of landing on a couple of different horses. One horse I really like is Beautiful Diamond in this particular race. I thought this was a real impressive horse on debut, winning by 3.5 lengths. Really kind of very, very mature and a very capable horse in that debut. So really like the way the form looked there. Another horse to consider is Relief Rally, 10-1. You're getting a little bit of a price here for a William Haggis horse with Tom Marquand aboard. This is a horse that's 2 for 2 and kind of stepped up in class a little bit, won impressively last time out by a few lengths. So again, a horse that you're seeing ascension from, you're seeing better and better numbers from. The time form ratings, the speed ratings, they look good. The other one at a big price is Gotta Love a Gray, which who doesn't love a gray? That was like the first thing I think everybody's parents, or cousins or uncles or aunts told them when they take them to the track is, bet on the gray horse sort of a thing. But listen, Gotta Love a Gray, also a horse 2 for 2, hasn't really done anything wrong. And you've seen a little bit of progression there, 10-1 on the morning line. That's a horse I would absolutely consider using in this particular race. So I think this is a pretty wide open one. Those 2-year-old races always feel pretty wide open to me. So that's one to certainly consider. Now, if we keep going on to the Duke of Cambridge Stakes, that's one that is for 4-year-old nut fillies and mares. And this is going a mile or 8 furlongs. And this is one where the morning line favorite or the projected favorite, Jumbly, for Joseph O'Brien with Ryan Moore aboard. The horse is fine. I like the horse. Finished, second last time out in a Group 2, won a Group 3 previously. There are definitely things to like about this horse. Ultimately, I went with Prosperous Voyage. I think that's a really interesting horse to look at in this race. 3-1 on the morning line, so a little bit of the second choice here. Frankie Dettori aboard for Ralph Beckett. There's a horse that won last time out in a Group 3. And I just think is a horse that's getting back into pretty good form after taking a long layoff. I think that first race in Newmarket and May 7th, you can kind of just shrug as kind of needing one off the bench, and the horse kind of showed what its capabilities were last time out. So that's one I would absolutely take a look at using. Jumbly is a very good horse. I'd probably be foolish to exclude that horse if you're including him in certain tickets that you're putting together. The other horse that is interesting to me is Rogue Millennial. Rogue Millennium. I'm sorry, not Millennial. That's a whole nother social discussion about millennials and Gen Xers and all that good stuff. But Rogue Millennium is another horse that I really like. And at 10-1, you're getting a little bit of value here. This is a horse that's had a couple of nice efforts the last few times out. Feels like a very honest horse that's kind of progressed a little bit from 3 to 4, actually. And has finished second or third the last 3 times out, and you're looking at Group 3, Group 1 competition. So you're looking at much higher level of competition, and the horse has really been able to hold up to that. So there's a progression there that I like from this horse. Um, Potapova is another horse that I would probably take a look at, being jockeyed by Richard Kingscote. This is a horse that actually just lost to Prosperous Voyage and a few others last time out at Epsom, but has some good races going back to last year. But like I said, at 20-1, I understand where you're going with that horse, but I'd rather go with a horse like Rogue Millennium, 10-1. That's one that I really like in this particular race. Well, let's move along to the Prince of Wales Stakes. And this is one that, I mean, my God, this is a stacked race. 10 furlongs for 4-year-old and up. And this is this really is a who's who of European and international racing. When you have horses like Luxembourg, and when you have horses like Bay Bridge and Adayar, and even My Prospero and Mostadef. And then there's Classic Causeway, who doesn't fit at all in this spot. And as an American, I have absolutely no problem admitting this horse does not belong in this race at all, in my opinion. But when you look at Adayar, Luxembourg, and Bay Bridge in particular, I mean, these are 3 just tremendous horses. And if we get any 3 of these to come over to the Breeders' Cup, I would be thrilled. Bay Bridge feels like a horse that, obviously got the job done last year at Ascot over Adayar. But last 2 times out, finished third, finished second by a half length to Luxembourg last time out of Cura. It's possible that, maybe third time back on the form cycle, Bay Bridge takes that next step forward. Always a really good horse, and you're getting a little bit of a better price. But it's just hard to get past the top 3 choices in this race. I mean, Adayar is just he's a horse I always really loved. And, going back to his 3-year-old year and, then even last year, horse I was always a big fan of. But Luxembourg's just been so classy as well, being able to get that win last time out in a Group 1 at Cura over Bay Bridge. So I'm not going to try to get fancy with these 3. Those are my top 3 choices. And this is one where you just sit back and enjoy it. I'll probably be, if I had to pick, I probably would pick Luxembourg as my top choice in this one. But it's going to be a tough one to choose between, I think, for most racing fans in this particular spot. But I do think Bay Bridge is worthy of a bet, because this is a horse that you're getting, like I said, a little bit more of a price there. And I think you could still get a really solid win contender. Well, let's talk a little bit about the final group race of the day on Wednesday. And that is the Queen's Vase Stakes. And this is a Group 2 going 14 furlongs, which is 1.5 miles for American audiences. And this is one where, listen, the top horse, Gregory, looks really tough. This is a horse that has won very impressively the last 2 times out. This is a race just for 3-year-olds, lightly raced horse, but looked really good winning both times out, winning last time by actually 3 lengths. John and Thaddeus Gosden, Frankie Dettori up on the mount. Obviously, this is going to be Frankie's final Royal Ascot. We're all hoping to see the leaping and the flying dismount in the winner's circle. So certainly one I think to keep in mind. Another horse that I'll be using is Chess Piece, though. This is a really nice horse that I think came back in the last effort looking really good. And at York, I think running very effectively that day with Ryan Moore aboard. You don't get Ryan anymore. James Doyle's hopping up, but James has ridden this horse effectively before. And over soft ground, I think you can make an excuse that race 2 back maybe might not have been the footing that you would have wanted that day. So a Chess Piece at 7-1, like I said, a little bit of an interesting horse that I'd be willing to use. And then the other one is Circle of Fire. This is a horse that I think is a nice horse at, you're getting a little bit more of a price. I know I have down here 2-1. It's actually closer to 7-1, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of what the projections are. But this is a horse, again, that's never finished worse than third in his career, has stepped up and run in some of these group or stage races before. I think is a horse that is kind of on the come up a little bit, and I think is improving the last couple of times out. So that's one that I'll take a look at using as well. But Gregory looks pretty tough in this spot to finish out the Wednesday card. Let's move on to Thursday at Royal Ascot, and this is another big day, obviously, 4 group races that day, and we're going to kick things off with the Norfolk Stakes going 5 furlongs for 2-year-olds. And this is where I guarantee you, audience members from North America are going to be going nuts on this particular race, because this is the race where we expect to see the biggest and probably best chance at getting a winner for North American audiences, and the American runner, American Rascal, who is for Wesley Ward. What I will tell the European audiences is this: that horse could not have looked better in debut. I mean, this was a horse that debuted and everyone was abuzz. This was by far and away the most impressive 2-year-old debut we had of a horse on the turf in the United States. And it was not even close in terms of second. We just had recently a Bob Baffert horse that debuted, a horse named Muth on the dirt, who looks very, very fast as well. But American Rascal just looks so much the best in debut. And I think this is a horse that really does stand a legitimate chance at potentially winning. Obviously, is going to have to contend with elite status, a horse that has just blown away competition as well, and has won the first 2 races by a combined 8 lengths, has not really been challenged yet. And in that regard, is very similar to American Rascal, who won on debut by 10.5 lengths. So neither of these horses are challenged. What happens once they get challenged? That's going to be the big question. But I do like American Rascal quite a bit. I'll be rooting for that horse as a real opportunity. Now, the one horse that I will say that is interesting to me at a little bit more of a price is His Majesty. This is a horse that I thought, for Aidan O'Brien, I thought ran well on debut and against Valiant Force and won that race, comes back and finishes third to Give Me the Beat Boys, horse I mentioned on the first day. Now, I'm very, very high on that horse. If Give Me the Beat Boys runs to the ability I think he can on Tuesday, in my opinion, that tells you a little bit about His Majesty and maybe the chance that this horse has in that race. 16-1 right now, projected odds. I would absolutely be including this horse on my tickets for the first race of the day on Thursday in the Norfolk Stakes. Well, let's head to the Ribblesdale Stakes, and this is one where, again, there is one of the biggest favorites of the whole week. And there's one other race where there's this heavy of a favorite at 4-5 on the projected odds. And for this one, Al-Sifa, I should say, for John and Thaddy Gosden, Jim Crowley aboard. I mean, come on. The horse has won his 2 career efforts by over 11 combined lengths. I mean, the horse, again, has never been challenged, never really been forced into a tough situation. Understandable favorite, a horse you'd be foolish, I feel, to like throw out. But that said, I think there are some big prices in this race that might be a little bit interesting. One of those is Azazat. This is a horse that has run well every time out, has never finished worse than third, and finished second in a Group 3 last time out. I just think this horse has some nice time form rating figures. I think this horse has shown a little bit more mature in terms of this is now going into the 5th career race. Remember, Al-Asifa is a horse that's only going to his 3rd career race. So you get a little bit more experience with Azazat. And I think is a horse that is sitting on a really big potential race here. Now, the other one that I am interested in is Lumiere Rocker, I should say, or Lumiere, or perhaps Lumiere. This is what happens when Americans start talking about European racing. But Lumiere Rock, Joseph O'Brien horse, another horse that just shows a lot of consistency, has shown some improvement the last couple of times out, has run against this kind of group stage company, has run a couple of Group 3 races, actually going back 3 and running as a 2-year-old, winning a Group 3, and then finishing second last time out in a Group 3 to Caroline Street. I think this horse, again, 16-1. If you're going to play a favorite up top, it makes sense to maybe try to include some big prices underneath. I'll use those 2 in the Ribblesdale Stakes. That's one that I'm quite interested in. Let's move on to the 3rd race on the day, and that is the Gold Cup Group 1, going 20 furlongs. 20 furlongs. In the United States, we would just pass out by that point. We don't even do anything that's 20 furlongs. 2.5 miles. And so this is one that is obviously a huge race for 4-year-olds and up. And, this features some really big horses as well. So obviously Coltrane for Andrew Balding, Ocean Murphy aboard, We're thrilled to see Ocean back riding. One of the most talented riders. We in the United States have a jockey, Kent DeSormo, who struggled with addiction and other issues, but is super talented when he gets back on the horse. Ocean, we were hoping, is through the worst of his issues and is able to really be a positive contributor in the sport because he's got so much talent, obviously. But Coltrane's a horse that last 4 times out has never finished worse than second, with 2 of those being wins. It's very talented horse, going those long distances, running into Group 2, Group 3 races. Not a lot to really poke holes in the form of Coltrane, a horse that I think does make some sense. But if you're looking for a little bit of a price, listen, there's a few of them. Subjectivist is a horse that's coming back, third back from an extremely long layoff. Went from June 2021 to February 2023 without running. So came back from a 1.5-year layoff, basically. Needed a couple races, but showed a lot more that last Royal in Maidan, finishing 3rd out of 15 horses, losing to Broome that day. But that was a horse that was maybe didn't get the best trip that day in terms of just the way the race shape figured out. But Subjectivist 10-1, you're getting a little bit of price on a horse that was absolutely dynamite before he went to the bench. Multiple Group 1 winner, and so including at Royal Ascot 2 years ago in 2021. So obviously a very talented horse, one that I would absolutely be including on my tickets. You have Yebeer in this race. Yebeer is a horse I've always liked for Charlie Appleby with William Buick aboard. That's a horse I don't quite know if this horse is in the same form he used to be in, but again, second back from a really long layoff, you'd expect you're going to see a much improved effort as opposed to that 4th place finish in the Group 3 last time out. And then there's Broome, who's cross-entered and cross-nominated, I should say, in a race later on in the weekend. But obviously a horse I think most North American racing fans are familiar with because of coming over to the United States for the Breeders' Cup, but and winning. But Broome's a horse it's hard not to like for Aidan O'Brien. Always a very hard-knocking horse, and one that's come back, obviously won that grade Group 2, Grade 2, I should say, over Maidan, 2 back, over Siskany, who we see came back to the United States and absolutely dominated competition going long on the turf here in the United States. Broome came back, finished 3rd last time out in a Group 2. I'll be interested to see kind of what this horse does, because I wonder how many great races Broome has left at 7 years old, but I'm a sucker for that horse. And at 12-1, you're getting a little bit of a price. Well, let's move on to the final race on Thursday, and that is the Hampton Court Stakes. And this is a Group 3 race, and this one is going 10 furlongs for 3-year-olds. And there's a couple of horses that I like in this spot. Drumroll in particular is a horse that I'm very interested in this race. This is a horse that is 2 for 3 winning in 3 career efforts and has demonstrated, I think, a fair amount of ability in those races. Obviously, for Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore up on the mount, won a Group 3 last time out. And again, you see ascending speed figures every time out for this horse. So some things to like there, I think, from a progression standpoint. And obviously, when you have Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore, hard to go wrong with that combination. Listen, Torito is an interesting horse that I'm sure is going to get a lot of money for John and Daddy Gosden. That's one that I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to get on that horse at all. That's a horse that's very talented as well. Won 2 of the last 3 times out for very trusted connections. I ultimately like Epictetus a little bit more out of the John and Daddy Gosden barn. This one has Frankie aboard. And this horse, part of it is Torito is taking a step up in class. And Epictetus is very familiar with this level of class. This is a horse that was finished 2nd in a Group 3, 2nd in a Group 1, 5th in a Group 2, and then 5th last time out in a Group 1. Now, those efforts might not have been great, but he's running against excellent competition. Horses like the Foxes, Augusta Rodin, absolutely outstanding horses. Silver Knot, another really good horse. So has run against excellent horses at this level. Epictetus, at a little bit more of a price, is a horse that I would absolutely be interested in. And then, you look at one other horse in this particular race that's, I think, a little bit interesting is Caernarfon. And that's one for Jack Channon, Connor Beasley aboard. I'm interested in this horse. This horse doesn't run a lot of bad races, just feels like a very consistent horse and feels like one now 3rd back from in the form cycle, 3rd back from the layoff. showed a little bit of progression from second to third time out, lost to a horse, two-back Mauge, who's a monster of a horse, a very, very good horse. And so I just think there's something there, again, facing superior competition, now coming back, very familiar with these sorts of circumstances. So 8-1, that's one I would take a shot with in the Hampton Court Stakes to close out Thursday. Well, let's head to Friday's card, and the second to last day, we're getting there. And this is one where, again, a lot of great competition, starting off with the Albany Stakes for 2-year-old fillies. And this is, I think, a pretty exciting race. And one of the things that I should say is very exciting from a North American standpoint is just how many horses are in these fields. That's something where, if you are not familiar with North American racing, if you're watching this and you're an English horse racing fan, a European horse racing fan, one of the things we struggle with here in North America is the number of horses that we actually have running, especially on the dirt, which Americans like watching dirt racing, I think, more than just about the rest of the world does, maybe with the exception of Japan. But a lot of our biggest races will have 5, 6, or 7 horses in the field. You come and you watch European racing, they'll have 20 horses in the field, no problem, and or more. And so it's really thrilling to watch that. It makes for great betting opportunities. So very excited for that. But listen, let's talk a little bit about this this Albany Stakes race going 6 furlongs for 2-year-old fillies. And listen, this is one where my top choice in this one is the horse Beautiful Diamond. Looks so good in debut. And this is one there's a horse I just really, really like a lot. And is one who, again, won so impressively first time out. Now, this is a horse that is cross-entered, I should say, in another race. I know I don't have a little asterisk there, but this is a horse that is cross-entered. So do make note of that. Or cross-nominated, I should say. But this is one who may or may not run in one, or obviously may run in both. I mean, we've seen that before where they run Tuesday and Saturday, but it's uncommon. And so we'll see. But like I said, Beautiful Diamond is, I think, a very, very classy horse, one that I would be using 7-1 in this particular spot. Then you look at a horse like Navassa Island at 8-1. Again, these are kind of projected early odds, so they're going to move around a little bit. But that's one who I like quite a bit. And I just think that Navassa Island's a horse that finished second by a neck to Porta Fortuna, who's also 8-1. But here's the thing, that was the debut race and finished right behind that horse. And it should be pointed out, Porta Fortuna is a horse that won her first 2 career races by a neck. Navassa Island has every opportunity to take a step forward next time out. Porta Fortuna may take a step forward third time out, but this horse has barely won the first 2 times. I'd rather take a horse that maybe has a little bit more upside in Navassa Island. So that's the one I'll probably end up using in this race. Both are very, very good horses, obviously. But one, like I said, to consider. And then the favorite, Carla's Way. Listen, again, horse, the definition of, hasn't done anything wrong. One debuted by 2.5 lengths, looking very, very good. James Doyle up on the mount. Certainly some nice pace figures and speed figures to come back from that first effort. So certainly a very serious horse. But again, these 2-year-old races, I always feel like it's a little bit more wide open. You can try to take a little bit of a shot at getting a little bit more of a price. So that's ultimately where I went in the Albany Stakes. Now, when we talk about the Commonwealth Cup, Group 1, going 6 furlongs for 3-year-olds, this is one I'm a big fan of. Little Big Bear, really, really good horse, who I've been following for quite a while. And remember back to that 2-year-old form and seeing this horse run in some really big races, obviously at Royal Ascot last year, winning over there in a 24 horse field, I should say, and then going on a little bit of a streak, winning 2 more group stage races after that. So, like I said, a really nice horse that I like quite a bit. And listen, has come back as a 3-year-old and had a really rough one at Newmarket. But again, that was over soft ground. Then last time out, you're getting a much better surface. Won that Group 2 race for Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore. Little Big Bear, obviously a very, very serious horse to take a look at in this race. One that, like I said, I think is sitting on a big performance. Sakir, another very good horse, 7-2, one of the favorites. Obviously, I think is a horse that is, again, has showed a lot of ability at 2, came back over that same soft Newmarket surface on May 6th, didn't turn in the best race. I would expect a step forward from this horse for Roger Varian next time out. So that's one to absolutely be including. And then from a value standpoint, Noble Style, this is a horse that is cross-nominated. Charlie Appleby, another horse that I like quite a bit. Again, stop me if you've heard this before. Ran over that soft turf at Newmarket, didn't necessarily like it, came back at Newbury and ran a little bit better next time out. So that's one at 12-1. You're getting a little bit more of a price. This is a horse that's progressing a little bit more. I think has some big races in him. You go back to those 2-year-old races, ran a huge race at York back last August with William Buick aboard that might be good enough to win here. So Noble Style, like I said, you're getting more of a price. That's one to certainly take into consideration for that particular race in the Commonwealth Cup. Let's talk a little bit about the Coronation Stakes. And this is a Group 1 going 8 furlongs for 3-year-old fillies. And this is the other huge favorite that I mentioned, Tahirya. A horse that a lot of American audiences are vaguely familiar with, but if you're not familiar with her, man, get familiar with her because she is incredibly talented. Of course, American audiences know Meditate very well. Meditate, of course, was a horse that was a very impressive 2-year-old, ran up against Tahirya and got beat, then comes over to the United States and wins the Breeders' Cup Turf Juvenile. So showed, was much the best compared to the American competition and some European competition. Then goes back over, and I do think Meditate's a very nice horse that, again, second time back, I think is going to run a little bit better. Again, that first time was over that soft going at Newmarket, and then comes back at Cora and runs a real bang-up race, finishing second at Tahirya. Now, maybe you just consider Meditate as a useful play underneath, but that's a horse that I would absolutely be including underneath, and you're getting more of a price. I think Tahirya is the class of the class here. Mauj is certainly a horse that is very capable of winning, won 3 in a row, and has been in outstanding form as a 3-year-old, has come back from that little bit of a layoff and has won twice at Maidan and then won over that soft going at Newmarket over Tahirya. So certainly one to consider using in this particular spot, but this is going to be an absolute bang-up race. I can't get beyond really the top 2 or 3 in this one. That's a huge race. Can't wait to see what that one turns out on Friday. But let's talk a little bit about the final group stage race on Saturday, or on Friday, I should say, and that is the King Edwards the 7th Stakes. And this is one where I think you can get a little bit of a price. Listen, King of Steel is the favorite, and I like King of Steel. Don't get me wrong. First of all, he's a massive horse. For European fans, he reminds me a little bit of a horse that was a Kentucky Derby horse here in the United States called Rock Hard 10. If you want to go back and look at that horse was just physically so much bigger than everybody else. And King of Steel kind of looked the same way, where Augusta Rodin, when he went by him last time out at Epsom, honestly looked like a junior varsity horse compared to King of Steel, who's just a huge animal. And so very good horse for Roger Varian. But let's remember that horse went off at 66-1 that day, ran a huge race to finish second in the Epsom Derby. But again, a horse that, finished 7th in Doncaster right before that last year. A lightly raced horse, 3-year-old. So, there's maybe this horse really matured and grew over the break, but now you're going from a 66-1 horse to a 7-4 bet currently in terms of looking at the overseas markets. I'm not as interested in King of Steel at 7-4 as I was at 66-1. So I think he's a horse that you can try to get around. I ultimately went to 2 double-digit priced horses that I'm interested in here. Arrest, being at 12-1, is one obviously who did not run particularly well in the Epsom Derby, finished 10th that day to Augusta Rodin and King of Steel, but before that had really never done anything wrong, was, a Group 3 winner, finished second in a Group 1, and has 3 wins in 6 career starts. So this is a horse that is a very strong horse for John and Thaddy Gosden, Frankie Dettori aboard, certainly one to keep in mind. And then the other one that I would consider using is Circle of Fire. Again, another horse that I think is kind of interesting. And then, like I said, Military Order is kind of that other horse that I should mention is one of my other top choices. And this is another one who did not run particularly well against Augusta Rodin in the Epsom Derby, finished last actually. But you look at what this horse was doing before that, had won 3 consecutive races. For Charlie Appleby, Obviously, there are certain trainers and connections I tend to trust and follow. Appleby, John and Daddy Gosden, Aidan O'Brien, Roger Varian. These are all, Sir Michael Stout. These are all trainers that for North American audiences, some you may be more familiar with than others, but hard to go against a Charlie Appleby horse at double-digit odds. So one I would certainly consider there, who had fantastic form before that last effort. Admittedly, that was the first time running against that level of competition, so maybe that horse is just a little in over its head, but I'd be willing to give that horse another shot in this particular race. Let's close things out with the final day of Royal Ascot. And listen, if you are a fan of racing, we are going to have some really fun coverage on Saturday. We're going to be doing some live streams of the races at Royal Ascot on Saturday. So it should be, like I said, a really fun day. Make sure to tune back in on Trust the Profits. We're going to have a ton of content here. And kind of just like we did on the Kentucky Derby Day and the Belmont Stakes Day, we are going to do a live stream where we kind of stay live and talk through all these races, preview them, call them, then come back and talk about them and stay on, have guests, etc. So it should be a lot of fun. But let's start by talking about the Jersey Stakes, the Group 3 going 7 furlongs for 3-year-olds. And listen, the favorite here in this race is Covey, and certainly a horse that, has won 3 of the last 4, 3 of 4 in his career, won the last 3 in a row. Very, very good horse. I ultimately ended up going to the Antarctic as my top choice for Aidan O'Brien with Ryan Moore aboard. There's a horse that won last time out in a great Group 3. And I just feel like that was the second back from the layoff. Now you're getting third back in the form cycle. There's a horse that ran some big races last year. I just think this horse has upside and has the ability to run a huge race. So the Antarctic is a horse that I'll be using 8-1 projected odds right now. That's one I really like quite a bit. Listen, we've talked a little bit about a horse like Noble Style, who's already, has been in a couple of other, cross nominated in a few other races. Covey, I mentioned, very nice horse at 3-1. I don't know if I love the 3-1 price, but understand it. I mean, the horse, like I said, hasn't done anything wrong. This is a little bit of a step up in class, so we'll see. There's a test there for John and Thaddy Gosden with Frankie Dettori aboard. One of the other horses that I'll be looking at in this spot is Mysterious Knight at 14-1. An interesting horse in that this is a horse that came back last time out at Newmarket and ran dead last. But that was the first back in a really long time. Hadn't run since September of 2022. Comes back, runs in 23. Now you're getting second back on the layoff. This is a horse that had a couple of wins, had a Group 1 win last year, had a Group 3 win last year. This is a horse that can win big races. Again, Charlie Appleby, William Buick, 14-1 on the projected odds. I'll be using this horse underneath in all likelihood, but I would expect a step forward. I think that last time out, you see that so often. You've seen that with so many other horses that we talked about. Poor effort first time off the bench, taking a step forward the next time off the bench. Well, let's take a look at the Queen Elizabeth II Jubilee Stakes, Group 1 of 6 furlongs, going 4-year-old and ups. And this is the other one where Highfield Princess is cross-nominated. So she may very well end up running in this, may very well end up running in both. I mean, like I said, some horses have done that in the past, and so would not be a shock to me if that ended up happening. Interestingly, for American audiences, there is a horse named Artorias in this race. I bring that up because there is a horse in the United States named Artorias that just ran last weekend in a stakes race and finished 4th that day, but is a nice horse and is a stakes-winning horse in the United States, but not the same horse. Different horse over there, Artorias, and he's actually kind of the projected favorite at this point. So one to certainly take a consideration of. I ultimately kind of went in a slightly different direction. The horse took a little bit of a step back last time out and only really has one victory to its name. So I was going to go somewhere else. The horse that I ultimately ended up on as my top choice was Kinross at 10-1 projected odds. Ralph Beckett is the trainer. Love the connections. This is just a really, really good horse. This is a horse that was outstanding last year, just rattling off 4 consecutive victories last year at York, Doncaster, at Ascot. Just looks so good. Came over here to the United States, ran 3rd in that Breeders' Cup Mile to Modern Games. Kinross, this is making the debut. That's why you're probably getting a little bit more of a price. if this horse is cranked up and ready to go, Kinross is absolutely good enough to win this race. I'm a big fan of this horse. So I like Kinross quite a bit and has demonstrated the ability to win Group 1 competition. Like I said, you're getting a little bit more of a price there. Now, in terms of another horse that's a little bit of a price is the horse that's going to right above him in terms of the morning line or the projected odds, 9-1, and that's Sacred. Another horse winning a Group 3, second back, first time off the layoff for trainer William Haggis, another name that you have to trust and believe in over there. So that's one I really like. Has run against Kinross before, has run against a horse like Pogo I mentioned before, Naval Crown, some really nice horses, and has run respectably against that competition. Won last year at Newberry, won, like I said, last time out in a Group 3. I think this horse has the opportunity to take a step forward at 5 years old. I think you may just start seeing the best of this horse. So you're getting really nice odds at 9-1. Well, let's wrap things up with the final race on Royal Ascot that I'm previewing here, not the final race of the day, but the final group stage race, and that is the Hardwick Stakes, Group 2, going 12 furlongs, 1.5 miles for 4-year-olds and up. And this one, you have Hookham as the top choice, and very hard to get around this horse. Obviously, won first time back and did so in Group 3, Group 3 competition over Desert Crown. Showed progression in terms of speed figures, showed progression in terms of just about every metric you're going to look at. So there's a lot to like there. This horse, might be able to continue to progress this next time out. So like this one quite a bit for Owen Burrows. I will say the horse that is going to be talked about a lot is Pile Driver, of course, who is a monster of a horse and has, not run since last year at Ascot. And, beating Turquator Tasso and, winning a really thrilling Group 1 race. Pile Driver is a horse that you got to take seriously. And he's in this race at 7-1. I'd be hard-pressed not to use Pile Driver. I know he's coming off the long layoff, but that's a really, really great horse. I mean, a great horse. One of the best horses in the world when in top form. So is he in top form? Is he all the way cranked up? A little bit of the question we asked with Kinross in the previous race. And then finally changing the guard, 9-1, Aidan O'Brien horse. And this is one, again, second back from the layoff. And first time back was over soft ground. I'm going to throw that effort right out the window. This is a horse that has the ability to win Group 2, Group 3 competition. Has done it last year as a 3-year-old, now taking a step forward at 4. I was actually somewhat encouraged by that third place effort, considering the going. I think he's got an opportunity for the speed figures to come back a little bit stronger this time. Changing the guard, 9-1, a horse I absolutely like here. All right. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for the preview of Royal Ascot for 2023. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and best of luck over there. Make sure to press that subscribe button to get all of our great content on Trust the Profits. Make sure to like this video and let me know which horses, which races, which betting angles are you going to be using and looking most forward to this week at Royal Ascot. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.